Welcome back to the Daily Dope. So, the fallout continues on the Sessions rescinding of the Cole memo, as y'all might have, heard by now, I'm sure, unless you live under a rock. The fallout has been quite exquisite, to say the least. And one of my friends on Facebook was, like, oh, all this Sessions talk, what of it? What's gonna become of it? I'm just gonna sit here and wait and see how it plays out. And it's like the thing that I knew was happening because of Sessions in general. We have the cannabis caucus was formed, and basically people coming out for marijuana, and whenever somebody signs on as a co-sponsor to one of these bills that's floating around to decriminalize marijuana on the federal level, it's like this is happening, man. This is the positive thing. Is politicians are actually, they have the courage now to take a position, and the position is on our side. Because Jeff Sessions basically forced the issue, whereas before it wasn't politically expedient to force the issue because it was too easy for the federal government to just sit back and continue their policies unabated. Now that there's states that are just like, hey, we're gonna do this shit either way, buddy. So fuck off. Now that it made Jeff Sessions feel like he had to squander more of his political capital, which you really basically don't even have. And I guess the big takeaway from this clip here that you're about to watch is that, hey, everybody basically is just going to continue forward with their ambitions with cannabis. Over here, to start off this story, we have Vermont. The House in Vermont just voted to legalize marijuana, recreational possession. Growing plants, possess and grow kind of thing. That there isn't a regulated marketplace set up behind this thing, but they leave the door open for that. But like Washington D.C.'s, since it doesn't have that, I guess they're not really. The Jeff Sessions crackdown threat really doesn't affect just the legality of marijuana. The DEA hasn't been known to go after actual users. Possession is not really a big crime in the in the DEA's enforcement priority list. At the time that the Cole memo, and even before that when it was the Ogden memo. And we got to remember what these memos are, guys. The Cole memo is a guide. It's like a guide for the federal prosecutors and the judges, agents on the ground that might be drug enforcement agents. This thing called the Cole memo, which started out as the Ogden memo, basically was a guideline saying, hey, as long as the states are doing this, this, and that, and this and the other thing that we want, we'll pretty much let them enforce their own marijuana laws, and then there's this other thing called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which popped up in 2014, and it basically prevents the federal government from using funds in the budget to do certain things concerning marijuana in places that have marijuana laws that might differ from the federal government. And they went ahead and had the oversight to include pretty much almost all the states that have some kind of a marijuana thing. This is back in 2014. This has been adjusted and more states have been added to it. So, basically, this is still there. We're waiting on the federal government to do another budget deal, which they haven't been able to do since back in the Clinton days. But instead, they do these things called continuing resolutions, which is basically just the old budget, maybe a couple adjustments that everybody agreed on, and then they all look at the amendments again, and then they sign it. Currently, we're in a stopgap until mid-January, I believe, where they're going to maybe shut the government down again unless they have another stopgap or can agree on a continuing resolution. Either way, There's several Republicans and Democrats who have already said that they're not going to vote for a continuing resolution unless it includes these protections and these funding restrictions. So what else is going on? We have states that were going to go forward with their plans to legalize cannabis, all right? Or maybe they already have legalized cannabis and it's just going to be business as usual. So we start with Alaska. They have a recreational marijuana business owners. They're saying business owners shouldn't get too skittish. Legal cannabis continues to grow in popularity, and the state has come to rely on the tax dollars the program generates, said Corey Kerrigan, executive director of the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association. Now, there is another thing that you got to factor in. Jeff Sessions can't just go ahead and shut down. Let's just take Nevada, for example. They can't just go in there and shut down all the marijuana sales and just like arrest everybody. If you do that, the government of Nevada is going to get seriously pissed off because they rely on, I believe, $80 million in tax. I mean, it's quite a big piece of taxes. If they already figure out what they're going to do with it before the first weed sale was even made, they're like, okay, we got all this shit that's in this budget that we have earmarked for marijuana taxes, and they plan on making every penny of that, all right? So any amount of disruption in that is going to piss any of these states off. According to a statement from the industry, this is a clear slap in the face to the American voters and residents of Alaska who overwhelmingly and resoundingly have supported this industry at the ballot box. And the same goes for states like Michigan. We did this way back in 2008. The medical marijuana signed into law. It's a protection package, and it's a little bit not that great, but 64%, I think, of the electorate voted yes for it, and it's a pretty bold statement saying, hey, we don't fucking want you arresting people for medical marijuana in Michigan. Kerrigan pointed out that U.S. Rep. Don Young, a Republican who's a member of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and Alaska legislators traditionally have been supportive. Jana Weltson, a cannabis attorney in Anchorage, also isn't worried. She believes federal prosecutors in Alaska have bigger fish to fry. Quote, Alaska has some of the highest crime statistics in the nation, she said, so I'm guessing their focus is going to be on criminal activity that isn't marijuana. She also noted that Governor Bill Walker has been an ally to adult use cannabis. Walker, an independent, was one of 4 governors who sent a letter to Sessions last year asking the Department of Justice to maintain the Obama administration's hands-off enforcement approach to states that have legalized cannabis. Quote, we feel comfortable with our Governor Walker, she said. California, up and down the Golden State, public officials and cannabis industry leaders said the marijuana sector will continue uninterrupted. And I did make a video about this last year where they said this even then. You know, they were like, you know what? We don't really care what you think, Jeff Sessions. We don't really care what you want to do. We're going to keep doing what we want to do. Companies said they'll keep operating as normal and regulators don't intend on changing course. Lori Ajax, the chief of the California Bureau of Cannabis Control, said in a statement that she fully expects the DOJ and Trump administration to respect the rights of states when it comes to voter-supported legalization regimes. But even if they don't, there's no indication the loss of the Cole memo will affect California policies. Quote, we'll continue to move forward with the state's regulatory processes covering both medicinal and adult use cannabis, consistent with the will of California voters while defending our state's laws to the fullest extent, Ajax said in the statement. Other California officials offered similar stances. And by the way, the DEA has already threatened California because they apparently, according to some analysis, that there's an 11 million extra pounds of cannabis being produced in California other than what the state consumes. So there's 13 million pounds total produced and the state only consumes 2 million pounds or something like that. I think it's all horse shit, to be honest. But whatever, there shouldn't be a problem with exporting cannabis. Why is that? I mean, I know why, but you know, from a logical perspective, in a business sense, in a market sense, it's the most irrational policy on the fucking in the universe to say that something is legal in California, Washington, Oregon. Those places, well, not Washington, California and Oregon, they connect, right? They touch each other, maybe? No? Is it Washington? For some reason, my brain just hasn't clicked to a map right here yet. But I'm going to say that, two states side by side have legal marijuana. You should be able to fucking go from one state to the next, But we know that the federal government don't want any marijuana to go anywhere, period. Because it's corruption, man. It's corruption 101. The FDA and the DEA want their drugs to be the ones that get sold, and they want to count every single dose and make you pay for every single dose. And anybody that's making money off of any of these doses are going to be paying high taxes and regulation fees. Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, called the move, quote, an ideological temper tantrum by Jeff Sessions. I think that's my favorite one so far. And the Los Angeles City Council President Herb Wesson said it was an example of, quote, Washington running amok. California will stand together and pursue all legal, legislative, and political options to protect its reforms and its rights as a state, Newsom said in a statement. California Attorney General Xavier Becerra said he intends to, quote, vigorously enforce our state's laws and protect our state's interests. In California, we decided it was best to regulate, not criminalize cannabis, Becerra continued in his statement. After all, this is 2018, not the 20th century. All right, Jeff Sessions, it's not 1982 again. All right. Wesson, meanwhile, issued one of the more strongly worded responses by a California public official. Quote, we will not be bullied by an out-of-town, out-of-touch politician. The voters of California and Los Angeles have spoken, and we will continue doing our job of reasonably regulating the cannabis industry. And over to Colorado, where government leaders has the longest-running recreational marijuana program, came out against Sessions' actions in force. You got Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper, who joined Alaska Governor Walker in writing a letter last year objecting to Sessions' position on cannabis, released a statement that said in part, quote, today's decision does not alter the strength of our resolve, nor does it change my constitutional responsibilities. Republican Senator Cory Gardner said he's prepared to take all steps necessary, including holding up the confirmation of Justice Department nominees, and this is pretty big, until the Attorney General lives up to the commitment he made to me prior to his confirmation. That's a Republican, and he's trying to do Republican obstructionism against another Republican. It's pretty awesome. Usually they only do that against Democrats that want to do things for the people. But in this case, I guess sometimes Republicans are on your side, especially when billions of dollars are at stake. Brian Vincente, a cannabis attorney in Denver, said he thinks it's unlikely there will be a dramatic enforcement ramp-up stemming from Sessions' announcement that is heartened by the bipartisan backlash against Sessions' actions. Quote, but it's certainly possible that U.S. attorneys around the country, perhaps in certain areas that do have marijuana laws, may choose to make this more of a priority. And I think they better. If you're in a state, like I looked at my state representatives, and there's only one of them that's made a statement about this. Thank you, Jim Amish. I think that's his name. Justin Amish. Oops. Sorry about the teasers there. So he offered the following advice for business owners. This is time to double down on compliance. Make sure you're following all state and local laws. Get your taxes up to date. Continue to be good neighbors. If all those activities are followed, I'm not too concerned about Colorado's business owners. And like I keep saying, man, it isn't like the DEA hasn't been basically doing business as usual to people that are breaking laws in Colorado, in and around the legal marijuana world. The DEA still operates and still maintains a pretty good track record of a bust a week or so, maybe even more, on major grow operations and trafficking operations in and around Colorado Washington, California. I mean, this is nothing new. Business as usual, guys. So now, with the removal of the Cole memo, now the prosecutors and the attorneys are, now we can go a little bit farther. Instead of just busting people that are going outside of the state regulations, we can maybe even bust people that we don't like, that are players, that are good, honest players that are following their laws. So who knows? I mean, take whatever advice they're giving you from the top down. Obviously, if you're following the regulations of your area, you shouldn't have anything to worry about, in my opinion. Colorado's U.S. Attorney Bob Troyer issued a statement saying in part that his office already has been following the principles Sessions issued, a sign that he won't make any major changes in enforcement policies. Quote, "We will, consistent with the Attorney General's latest guidance, continue to take this approach in all of our work with our law enforcement partners throughout Colorado." Maine, even though Maine voters voted to approve recreational marijuana in 2016, Governor Paul LePage, a Republican, has steadfastly stood in the way of creating a working program. A Sessions announcement likely will only solidify his opposition. Quote, "It's going to hamper the rollout of the market," said Dave Boyer, the Maine political director for the Marijuana Policy Project. Boyer hopes Maine's federal prosecutor follows the will of the voters and doesn't crack down on the adult use market, but there's still work to be done to implement Maine's adult use rollout. A legislative hearing is scheduled for Friday to propose a bill that would be today with a new regulatory framework. The measure was approved by lawmakers, then vetoed by LePage last October. In nixing the bill, LePage cited concerns over the federal illegality of cannabis. A subsequent effort to override the veto failed. That don't make any sense. I bet you if they did that again, they could probably get that veto to get overridden. In order to implement their recreational program, provided that LePage vetoes another bill, Boyer said it will require changing the minds of Republican lawmakers to get the necessary two-thirds vote to override the governor. But LePage is still in charge of these government agencies, Boyer said. He now has a little more cover to say that he's not going to implement it, even though the legislature passes it. And in Massachusetts, after Sessions' announcement, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker said that the state plans to push forward with the implementation of the adult use cannabis sales. The Republican also called Sessions' move the wrong decision. Massachusetts voters approved recreational marijuana in 2016, and progress is being made towards a July 1st launch of sales. In December, the State Cannabis Control Commission approved a set of draft regulations. The commission said in a statement that, quote, "Nothing has changed because Sessions' announcement. Quote, "We will continue to move forward with our process to establish and implement sensible regulations for this emerging industry in Massachusetts." Chris Crane, managing partner for the Boston-based Forefront Ventures, said Massachusetts cannabis businesses are in a different position than those in states that have already begun recreational sales because of the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment remains intact. Bingo. Remember that? That was this one where, you really, as much as the Cole memo was a guideline to tell them what they could or couldn't actually pursue as far as investigations and cases and shit like that as a priority for law enforcement, but without those in place, they can basically do whatever they want until it comes down to the point where they are looking for funds. And it's unconstitutional for them to basically act like they have a blank check and pursue these cases and, prosecute them or whatever. If these people were following the guidelines of their state laws, then they will not have the funding available. The Department of Justice will not be able to use funds by the federal government. So I don't know, maybe they got another way to fund their operation. You would think. Quote, "The Justice Department and these U.S. attorneys are still, regardless of the Cole memo, prohibited from cracking down on state legal medical marijuana businesses." In Massachusetts, at least right now, everybody that's licensed and operational is licensed under the medical program. The July deadline to begin adult use sales gives the state's industry about half a year to assess what this really means, he added. The fact that Massachusetts has taken so long to implement their adult use program may be somewhat beneficial, Crane said. It gives business time to assess what the new reality actually is. Nevada's over to Nevada. Nevada's recreational market hasn't even hit full stride, and it's already outpacing expectations, with each month setting new records in sales, more than 38 million in October alone. Lawmakers don't seem too eager to slow the program. Representative Dina Titus of Nevada's 1st Congressional District said in a statement Thursday that Sessions' actions were, quote, a direct attack on the state of Nevada, sovereign tribal governments, and the rights of people in states, tribes, and territories all across the United States. She went on to say rescinding the Cole memo, quote, undermines Nevada's $622 million industry, threatens nearly $1 billion in new investments, and jeopardizes thousands of new jobs and more than $60 million in tax revenue for the state. According to the Associated Press, Nevada Senator Richard Tick Segerblom, a Democrat, said a federal crackdown could kill an industry on which the state now depends. Once again, the tax money, they're more than, they're more than depending on this tax money, all right? Republican U.S. Senator Dean Heller, and I'm going to stop again, and sorry about that. The reason that they depend on these funds from the marijuana sales so much is because the Republican donor class don't want to pay for anything anymore. They don't want to pay for public schools. They don't want to pay for programs to help poor people. They don't want to pay for the disabled. They don't want to pay pensions and other things that were already promised to people. They don't want to pay police officers. They don't want to pay firefighters. They don't want to pay nurses. And they don't want to fucking pay teachers. We already said teachers. They don't want to maintain public schools. They don't even want to fix the roads and bridges. So those donors that keep pulling in their money and not paying taxes because they have, Trump's accountant working for them. Basically, the government is always trying to borrow money because it doesn't have fucking money coming in from taxes. And, whenever they can find something where they can earmark the taxes directly for shit that these rich Republican donors ain't fucking paying for anymore because all their buddies gave them tax breaks, yeah, they get to depending on that money. Republican U.S. Senator Dean Heller of Nevada said Justice Department officials should meet with Governor Brian Sandoval and State Attorney General Adam Laxalt, also Republicans, on how the policy change might affect Nevada, according to the AP. And over to Oregon, David Kopelik, a shareholder in Portland's Emerge Law Group, said it's tough to predict how Oregon's U.S. Attorney Bill Williams will respond to Sessions' policy change. Copland noted, however, that Williams has adhered to the Cole memo and has yet to go after state-compliant marijuana business. But Williams did aggressively pursue federal charges for marijuana possession against a 19-year-old Native American, Devontra Thomas, who faced a year in prison over a gram of marijuana. I mean, come on, man. I'm sorry I even said that earlier about the whole possession thing and the federal government not trying to be involved with that small-time shit, but sometimes, when it's politically asshole of them, they'll do it. When news of this prosecution went public, Williams faced a fierce backlash from Oregon voters and politicians and eventually dropped the charges against the teen. Meanwhile, Governor Kate Brown, a Democrat, issued this statement, quote, reports that Attorney General Jeff Sessions will roll back federal marijuana policy are deeply concerning and disruptive to our state's economy. Over 19,000 jobs have been created by the market Oregon worked carefully to build in good faith in accordance with the Cole Memorandum. The federal government must keep its promise to the states that relied on its guidance. I mean, right, it's like they're pulling the rug out from under you. Like they gave you these things that said, okay, as long as you guys make sure that these things don't happen, we're cool with it, and mostly they're talking about teen use and, any kind of public health issues, the transporting cannabis from a legal state to an illegal state or whatever. Now, my argument there is the federal government just needs to shut the fuck up and get out of the way. It's ridiculous, man. You call this a free country? This is not a free country, man. It's not even close. Where's the liberty in being able to go to wherever you want in this country? That's why you have a 12-year-old girl suing you, Jeff Sessions, Because people want to be able to go from one place to another with their fucking medicine, man. And you're not qualified to say anything about cannabis, Jeff Sessions, because you're a fucking idiot that spews old talking points from the 80s. And nobody, you know, that shit's all been debunked. The gateway theory and the teen use causing brain damage and cannabis smokers driving being dangerous. All that shit is bullshit and we know it. So quit fucking with that shit. Kopelik also predicted that marijuana businesses already in operation would continue to stay open, but the people looking to break into the industry may now wait and see what happens. Yeah, that's what I said yesterday on my first video about this. So new investment might, you know, it might be a little bit sluggish at first, but as soon as people start seeing that they're not really going to make much of this crackdown thing, people are still going to get involved. The rewards are still pretty high for the risk. As this green rush thing is still a thing in a lot of places. So Washington State, much like Colorado, their program has been around too long to go anywhere now, according to industry watchers. The state governor and attorney general, as well as Seattle's mayor, all spoke out against Sessions' actions. Democratic Governor Jay Inslee called the revocation of the Cole memo the wrong direction for our state. Quote, in Washington State, we have put in place a system that adheres to what we pledge to the people of Washington and the federal government. It's a well-regulated, keeps criminal elements out, keeps pot out of the hands of kids, and tracks it all carefully enough to clamp down on cross-border leakage. Quote, we are going to keep doing that and overseeing the well-regulated market that Washington voters approved. Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson added, quote, I am disappointed that AG Sessions plans to abandon the current federal policy on marijuana, a policy that respects states' rights and focuses federal enforcement on key shared areas of concern. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin, a former U.S. Attorney for Western Washington, said, reversing course now is misguided legal overreach and an attack on Seattle, the state of Washington, and the majority of states where the voters have made their voices heard loud and clear. According to the U.S. Attorney Annette Hayes, who represents Western Washington, Sessions, quote, reiterated his confidence in the basic principles that guide the discretion of all U.S. attorneys around the country and directed that those principles sphered enforcement of federal law regarding marijuana. Okay. It's still too early to tell what this all means for the cannabis business owners in Washington State, said one marijuana lawyer, but marijuana businesses need to know that this is a huge shift in federal marijuana enforcement policy, said Daniel Short, a Seattle-based cannabis attorney. And, you know, my love-hate relationship with those cannabis attorneys, if cannabis was if prohibition was all the way eliminated, there would be really no use for cannabis attorneys. So they always have a little bit of fear-mongering in whatever they say. So be careful with them. And I'm not throwing you guys under the bus, believe me. I'm just not a big fan of lawyers in general, okay? So the District of Columbia is a unique marijuana market. Like I said about what was going on in Vermont, they don't really have any regulatory framework around sales. So possessing and growing, yeah, that's going to be you know, things that the federal government should definitely stay way away from. And like I always say, the federal government, the DEA, they're not interested in small-time shit by and large. I'm not saying they won't or they have some kind of restrictions against going after somebody for growing less than 100 plants, but generally speaking, we see the DEA involved in operations with multiple sites and thousands of plants, and you know, they're just simply not, the resources are just not there for them to go after anything smaller. And it's a fact. That's a fact. You would win your case just on the Cole memo, even though it's not a thing, or not the Cole memo, but the Rarnbacher Blumenauer amendment as it is now. So there you go on it's business as usual, guys. And here's one more thing on the attorneys. We did see a statement floating around the internet about the situation, and this is the Massachusetts district attorney. So this is from Dan Adams. I'm not sure how this tweet made it to me, but this is a reporter from the Boston Globe, and he says, U.S. attorneys for Massachusetts sent this email to municipal police chiefs in the state last night about Sessions' Cole memo news. He's striking a more ominous tone than some of the other federal prosecutors who have moved to reassure the marijuana industry. So let me just quickly read this email that was sent by this Attorney General. So it says, as you have likely heard, Attorney General Sessions issued a memorandum this afternoon rescinding prior Justice Department guidance limiting the scope of marijuana prosecutions and directing U.S. attorneys to enforce federal marijuana laws in keeping with the general principles that have always governed federal prosecutorial discretion. As you all know too well, and as the mainstream medical studies have repeatedly shown, marijuana is in fact a dangerous drug, especially to young users. So that little part there is ripped right out of Jeff Sessions' Reefer Madness seminar that he had about a week ago or so, where he had all these Reefer Madness people get together, and you had doctors and lobbyists and people like Kevin Sabat, the Prohibitionists, who are basically like that's their life's work. That's probably developed by them. They're like, hey, you can say this and you can say that, and they got this like bullet list of Reefer Madness talking points that they're trying to put out there. Because remember, Jeff Sessions said that the American public isn't being receptive about their marijuana, about the knowledge of marijuana or whatever. They don't want to learn about marijuana's dangers. It's because there is no dangers of marijuana. You are the dangers of marijuana. You and the gaggle of thugs with badges and guns that kick people's fucking doors in. And, you got your flashbang grenades. You got your fucking warrants that don't even, that they call the judge up and they're like, hey, we got a weed warrant. Okay, boom, rubber stamped. They never give a fuck. I've never heard of someone getting a warrant turned down for a weed warrant. So anyway, that's some total fucking reefer madness right here. There's no mainstream medical studies that have shown any kind of dangers for marijuana. And if there has been one, I'll let you know as soon as I find out about it. But so far, we have nothing. We have hospital visits. People took too many brownies or something and they went to the hospital. Guess what? They checked out fine the next day or even the same day. No one's ever died from the consumption of cannabis, and it's actually impossible. So there is no dangers. There's no brain defect dangers or worries. All the things that they talk about being the dangerous things about marijuana are actually about alcohol. They just want to try to make people that don't really know much about marijuana believe that marijuana does the same thing to you that alcohol does. It makes you an irresponsible person, a shitty driver. You get brain damage from fucking using it. It leads to heroin too, don't you know? All these things are all bullshit talking points have been disproven time and time again. So there's no mainstream medical community that has anything bad to say about marijuana. All right. And you're on the wrong side of history for even spewing that shit. So he's saying it has a direct and negative impact on the communities we serve. No, it does not. You and your law enforcement of it does have negative impacts. It breaks up families. It ruins people's lives, gives people's fucking criminal records for no reason. Victimless crime. So you are the one that's having a negative and direct impact on your communities. All right, back to him. This office has always prosecuted marijuana cultivation and trafficking as well as the laundering of illegal proceeds from the trade. I will vigorously enforce federal laws in this area. I want to express my support and commitment to you and your department's efforts with marijuana enforcement. This office stands ready and able to assist you. So, again, this is the Massachusetts area attorney. We hear you loud and clear. What you really want to do is you really want to just put people in cages for weed, and it's just a little absurd, okay? So that was attorney Andrew E. Lelling. Now, I don't encourage people to go on witch hunts and tweet stuff to attorneys that work for the U.S. Federal Department of Justice and shit. But if you was to find him and express your opinion, they probably need a little bit of that. All right, why Sessions' anti-marijuana move might be good for legalization. This is what I've been saying because, you know, like you'll hear, these people finally have the courage to take a position, and the position is that the federal government shouldn't interfere with it. And that's a pretty minimalist position, in my opinion, but it's better than what you would have got 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you couldn't get a fucking, you know, so-called liberal Democrat to take a solid position to legalize marijuana. You couldn't get Bill Clinton to do it in the 90s. You couldn't even get Jimmy Carter to do it. I mean, he would say, yeah, we shouldn't arrest people for marijuana, but he didn't say anything about we should legalize marijuana. So, for the past several years, the marijuana industry and its customers have been relying on a piece of paper, an Obama-era document known as the Cole Memo, to indulge in their business and pleasure, mostly without fear of arrest by federal agents. On Thursday, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded that document. Observers took it as a sign that a large-scale cannabis crackdown could be on the way. Now another thing about that is, come on. I mean, really. They barely have enough money to justify, and with the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment still intact, they don't have the funds to do any of the crackdownage. They can't even go after shit that's like, you know, they can barely go after shit where they know for a fact it's illegal operators doing something that's off regulation. Even to do that, they're going to have to like work hand in hand with the local people, make sure that their resources are spent before the federal government puts any resources into it. That's just the way it is. So if you think that the federal government is going to ramp up some kind of a blitzkrieg style, like, you know, shut them down situation, first of all, haven't they tried that for fucking 80 years straight and it still hasn't worked? But second of all, they definitely don't have the funds for that. So no, that's not going to happen. That huge crackdown is just a pipe dream of Jeff Sessions. He probably thinks about it while he's counting sheep to go to sleep at night, but the nightmare is there for him every morning when he wakes up. Every morning he wakes up, he sees lawmakers in Texas talking about legalizing marijuana. He sees Vermont about to legalize marijuana, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, hell, Rhode Island. The whole East Coast is about to legalize marijuana right under his fucking nose, while he smells the smell of burning marijuana because it's already legal in Washington, D.C. I don't even know what to do about this Sessions fucking guy, man. All right. Could this actually turn out to be good news? Yes. The development generated immediate and intense pushback from federal and state officials from both sides of the aisle. Unheard of. I mean, yeah, you had Ron Paul. He was the only fucking Republican in the history of Republicans to ever say anything about legalizing marijuana on the federal level. So this is huge. You're going to see how huge it is in a minute. So yeah, he gives some examples. You know, you got a Republican from Iowa. They don't even have really that good of a legal medical marijuana thing going on. But even that guy, Congressman Rod Blum, because of Jeff Sessions' action, I'm joining the Respect State Marijuana Law bill. I like that. I believe in the state's rights, and I've seen cannabis-derived medicines can stop seizures in a child, help veterans cope with pain, or provide relief to senior with glaucoma. Did he say help a veteran cope with pain? I like that, because that's all-inclusive. He could be talking about mental pain or physical pain. And when you're talking about, you know, physical pain, you're talking about a veteran not getting addicted to opioids. I like the sound of that. Not surprisingly, lawmakers who represent state legal marijuana businesses and consumers who are now at greater risk in a world without the Cole Memo are also fired up. Even Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, who I always criticize as being just milquetoasty, lame, donor-soaked, just no, you know, no backbone jellyfish. Well, once in a great while, she'll say something that sounds okay. All right, whatever. But she said that her statement was a move that Congress should not only continue an existing budget rider that prevents the Justice Department from interfering with state medical cannabis laws, but should expand its scope to protect full recreational laws as well. Quote, Congress must now take action to ensure that state law is respected and that Americans who legally use marijuana are not subjected to federal prosecution. All right, again, rewind the clock back 10 years. If a Democrat said that 10 years ago, they would have got kicked out of the fucking Democratic Party probably. That's how corrupt they have always been. But yeah, you would never hear a Republican crack that one out, ever. Republicans would just simply never have said that. And a Democrat would have probably got voted out of office or something. They probably would have primaried them with a little bit more right-wing person 10 years ago. I mean, the Democrats just weren't there, man. They still aren't. Democrats will continue to insist on bipartisan provisions and appropriations bills to protect Americans lawfully using medical marijuana. Congress should now consider expanding the provisions to cover those states that have decriminalized marijuana generally. You also had Ron Wyden of Oregon saying that any budget deal Congress considers in the coming days must build on the current law to prevent the federal government from intruding in state legal voter-supported decisions. So these guys keep, the people that are actually in the government, not the media types that are all talking about this crackdown and shit and fear-mongering. Everybody keeps bringing back the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment, and that's what's going down, guys. I mean, the federal government still can't just, start writing checks to prosecutors and investigators and DEA offices and shit. It's just not how the game goes, man. So, and another thing coming out of all this is 2020 Democratic presidential contenders rushed to beat one another to the punch in slamming the Trump administration's anti-cannabis action. Not a single member of Congress from either party issued a statement supporting the rescission of the Cole memo. Now, that's another important one, too, that would have never happened 10 years ago. Republicans for sure would have been like, oh, great move, Sessions, we're coming after you. What was it that George H.W. Bush said? Don't think that there ain't room in prisons for you because we'll build more prisons for you. And he kept that promise. Him and Bill Clinton together built 80% more prisons. So, the amount of Americans locked up between George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton basically quadrupled. And guess what? Yeah, they locked them up for marijuana. A lot of them. So this statement right here is big. Nobody said anything in support of Sessions' decision. Not even senators, not even far right-wing senators, not even prohibitionists, not even Chris Christie. What has he got to say about all this? I'm sure he's cheering, and I'm sure so is Governor LePage. But currently, their power is waning, and basically they're just trying to throw wrenches in whatever machine they can on their way out. All right, so whereas the marijuana industry has been operating in a sort of legal gray area under the Cole memo, the medical cannabis budget rider, the Sessions move forces marijuana to the forefront of American politics, where a breaking point may finally be reached. So all that shit I say about how it never sees the light of day or they never come out of committee, this time I think we're going to see some action on some of these bills that are already out there, or maybe someone's going to come in with a new one with just the right timing. You never know how these things work. While in the short term, Sessions' move has sent shock and fear through the cannabis community, caused stocks to tumble, spooked investors, and gave banks great pause about opening accounts for marijuana businesses, the disappearance of the Obama-era protections could actually have positive long-term implications. Yes, DEA agents may raid some businesses, and federal prosecutors might bring some cannabis entrepreneurs to court. People in the cannabis industry could go to prison or have their assets seized. And any of that shit is going to make a fucking loud noise. And people are not going to be happy about that shit. Those actions could have long-lasting implications, negative for those targeted. That's nothing to be taken lightly, and no one in the legalization movement wants it to happen. But by launching a crackdown in any form, Sessions' Justice Department could spur a backlash among the public from federal, state, and local officials whose job-creating, tax-paying constituents are being targeted. And that could finally force a resolution to the growing federal-state divide on marijuana that might otherwise persist longer in a murky gray area under the Cole memo and annual appropriations riders. if Congress passes legislation to change cannabis's status under federal law in the next year or two, legalization supporters may have Jeff Sessions to thank for it. Now we are coming up close to that budget problem in Washington that we always have every however long they want to give themselves to have it. But this time I believe I should look more into it, but I believe we're looking at like sometime in the next week we're gonna see all this talk about the government shutting down and whether or not this amendment's gonna still be in the fucking continuing resolution or stopgap, whatever it's gonna be. So we'll wait and we'll see. And if somehow, the inside game is that they fucking take that shit out, the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer, as it is now, amendment, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, what used to be the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, it became law in 2014, but it failed to have its impact due to the Justice Department implementing the amendment in an incorrect manner. So that's something that's been hanging over it the whole time too. And this here is another thing you can look at that Tom Angell put together over at the Marijuana Moment. And I want you to use this as an example as to why, if you are going to give somebody doing this work and this research and these, this is extremely dedicated work that he's doing. And what he did here is he has a compilation of all the lawmakers' reactions that are public to the Jeff Sessions move. And, I'll go ahead and link that. But like I said, if you want to support someone in this research, if you want to support someone that's doing the work, the really hard shit, and it's true. He's also speaking truth to power. Some people think Tom Angell's activism days are over and he's now kind of neutered into, being just a reporter that's just putting down the facts. I don't see it that way. I think he's one of the hardest working activists because of stuff like this. This is important work. And all these people speaking truth to power, like Blumenauer, Eleanor Norton, Barbara Lee, Tulsi Gabbard, Thomas Massey. I mean, these are Republicans, Democrats alike. Jody Heitkamp. And you can even, obviously, you can search for your own representatives quite easily. The format, generally speaking, is going to be, your parentheses, D or R for Republican or Democrat, dash, and then your state's prefix. We go to Michigan. I looked for Democrats in Michigan, and gee, snap, there wasn't any. So Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters, and all the other representatives that are representatives in Michigan, be it Senate, that's the senators, but all you representatives, where's your spine at? And I wrote my letter to Peters and Stabenow. Where is your fucking spine? What is going on? You can't even take a position that, basically all of your colleagues are taking positions for the government to get off our backs in states that have done their own legalization. Well, in Michigan, we have medical marijuana. Under our Constitution, marijuana shouldn't be federally criminalized, says Justin Amish, Republican from Michigan. Representative Tom Garrett has a bill that will stop AG Sessions in its tracks, the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act of 2017, which I've co-sponsored. And thank you again to you and all these other co-sponsors here. Thank you, guys. We have Tulsi Gabbard. We have Scott Taylor, Jared Paulus, Earl Blumenauer, Don Young, Justin Amish, Donna Rohrabacher, Raul Grijalva, sorry about your name if I pronounce it wrong, Steve Cohen, Jamie Raskin, Ed Perlmutter, Beto O'Rourke, Duncan Hunter, Pramila Jayapal, sorry again, and Ro Khanna. Thanks, guys. And there's also the Cory Booker bill in the Senate that's another awesome way that we can beat Sessions at his own game. But this shit has to actually get voted on. And this is the closest we're ever going to get when you got somebody like Jeff Sessions beating the beehive with a fucking stick. Now you got more bees out here trying to sting. And the 2020 presidential race, if you don't think marijuana is going to be a major issue in the 2020 presidential race, you're fucking sadly mistaken. And if you're a Republican, you better start figuring out how you can stake out a position for legalizing marijuana or just getting the federal government out of this whole idea that they can prohibit marijuana or control it in any way, shape, or form. So the final piece of this is the presidential race of 2020. Moments after Attorney General Jeff Sessions made it easier for federal marijuana laws to be enforced in states where possession and use of substances is legal, the drumbeat began. One by one, Democrats from likely to dark horse candidates for their party's 2020 presidential nomination denounced Sessions' move. By the end of the day, there was a unanimous support among these ambitious Democrats in supporting the state's rights to legalize marijuana without federal interference. The stance of the Obama administration. It's a telling sign of just how popular the issue is with the party's base. Oh, the party's base? Yeah, they're pretty fucking, pissed off that anybody in the party, I'm talking to you, Stabenow and Peters, would not stake out a position right now. When are you up for re-election? Can we get somebody to primary these people? So the people that came out with statements against Sessions, and I'm not going to read all the statements in the interest of time, but we have Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Cory Booker, a new guy, in my opinion, emerging, John Delaney, and then Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Seth Moulton, as well as Senator Kamala Harris. And again, Kamala Harris is always talking in past tense. It's instead of wasting money on failed policies like the war on drugs, let me just remind you that the federal government is not saying that the war on drugs is a failed policy. All right, it's a failing policy. Has it failed a lot of people? Yeah, it failed at all its missions too, but they still are getting 22 plus billion with a B a year over at the DEA to continue this racist, fucking ridiculous war against the citizens of this country. That's all I got on this today. I'm sure there will be more fallout and there will be more things that are going to happen because of this action by Jeff Sessions. And I thank Sessions for bringing this shit to the forefront, because we've been trying to fight this battle, and the people that haven't been with us on this battle have been the representatives. Even though more people have been joining the fight every year, every decade, this fight that started in the early 70s. And yeah, cannabis prohibition is 80 years old this year. Let's fucking end this shit. Or this is the 81st year. I'm sorry. That was 2017. Can we be over this shit by now? Come on. Subscribe to my channel. You'll get more updates like this. Thanks. Have a good one.